everybody for the cycle and of Juridical Commission for the Development of Outstanding Peoples, CAPASH, on the topic self-determination, entre parentheses, the denial of self-determination, Hawaii and Okinawa case studies. We've got two video messages that we would like to show by YouTube. Mr. Robert Kajiwara, President of Peace for Okinawa Coalition, Special Envoy of the Hawaiian Kingdom to the Law Show, Kingdom and China. And Mr. Hoshin Nakamura, Okinawa Independence Advocate, teacher at the Okinawa Language Center and at Okinawa International School. On my left, here is Ms. Catherine Jane Pfister, founder of Warriors Japan, human rights defender for the prevention of violence against women. And on my right, my long life friend, Mr. Leon Carlo Silo, the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Kingdom of the Hawaiian Islands. I would like to also remind you that just after our site event, there is another site event with nearly the same topic, justice and self-determination, organized by International Human Rights Association of American Minorities, IHRA. I do not want to talk so much as a moderator, but I would like to just say a short sentence. This is coming from the French Revolution and it's a well-known sentence that today's generation doesn't have a right to prison future generations by today's laws. And when we look at the concept of the United Nations Charter, the best part of the United Nations Charter is a living mechanism with 30 making bodies inside it. So I would like to pass to the YouTube videos, and after the videos I will give 12 minutes to Ms. Catherine Jane Fisher, and then I will give the parole to Mr. Leon Carlo.
Independence is important not only for Okinawa but peoples all over the world. America was a colony of England, and they fought to become independent. Many nations under the colony, including India and other countries, even China was a colony. So all became independent. Okinawa duty, as I mentioned, was a kingdom once, many hundred years of independence we enjoyed. But if you lose independence, you lose your self-determination, you are like a slave of controlling ruling nation. Who wants that kind of subordination? European people have been suffering so many years, being controlled by other countries, especially Japan, and suffer got, including Okinawa, more than 123,000 island people lost their precious lives. Because Okinawa became part of Japan, and Okinawa young men are drafted and fought and died in China, Chinese continent, even during the Battle of Okinawa. So, what Okinawa people need is their independence again, regain their independence, so that they can determine their own future. Today, Okinawan democracy is being destroyed, human rights being destroyed, culture being destroyed, including language destroyed. Many precious things are being destroyed. So we don't want this. We need to regain independence, to regain identity, self-respect, and human rights, through self-determination. So independence is very precious, important, not only to Okinawan people, but people all over the world. No one should be suppressed. No one should be suffering under external pressure. So we need freedom, self-determined independent nation.
Now, what would an independent Okinawa or Ryukyu look like?
We will have our own self-government. We want this government to be democratic. So our government new government will have president who will be directly elected by people of 80 years old. And like the rest of the world, or people enjoy democracy. So we want to have a republic of Ryukyus, being democratic, in which people can enjoy freedom, self-determination, pride, dignity, and so on.
Now, what about the economy? What would the economy of an independent Ryukyu look like?
Many people say, without economic power, without economic independence, we cannot have political independence. This is totally wrong. Totally wrong. There are many nations who became independent politically first. Economy without political independence. For example, Japan was suffering from international debts 1952 when it became regaining independence after the war. Japan was suffering economically, but became independent and became prosperous later. China, same thing. India, same thing. They have been prosperous now. Economically, they are suffering when they became independent. But today, because of their self-determination, they decide what is important to do for their country. So, economic independence follows political independence. Political independence should come first. Therefore, Okinawa should regain political independence first, I believe.
And now, this is our second video.
Hi everyone, Robert Kajiwara here today. We're talking about self-determination for Okinawa and how that relates to the situation in Hawaii. Now, the situations in both Okinawa and Hawaii are very, very similar. So if you understand one, you also understand the other. That's how similar they are. Okinawa was an independent nation known as Lushu in the Okinawan language, or known as Ryukyu in Japanese. In 1879, Japan invaded and illegally annexed Lushu. Japan, of course, went on to do the same to many other countries, such as China, Korea, and the Philippines. After World War II, all of those other countries were given back their independence, except for Lushu. To this day, Lushu remains occupied by a very large foreign military presence against the will of the indigenous Lushu people. After World War II, America occupied the Lushu Islands, using it for their military forces. In 1972, America gave Lushu back to Japan. That's right. So you see the problem here. You have Japan and the United States making decisions amongst each other on behalf of the Lushu people. And meanwhile, the voice of the Lushu people are completely ignored. Numerous human rights violations have been regularly occurring in Lushu for over a century now. Lushuans have been peacefully protesting this, but to no avail. Both Japan and the United States have basically completely ignored the Luchu people. Although there are a number of contentious issues occurring in Luchu all the time, the one that's been in the forefront lately has been at a place called Henoko, located on the island of Okinawa. Henoko is a precious coral reef filled with hundreds of rare and endangered species. It's called the second most biodiverse reef in the world, only behind the Great Barrier Reef. And Japan is building a new U.S. military base at this location. The base, if constructed, would basically destroy this reef. There are numerous problems with this base at Henoko, not just from the environmental perspective, not just from the human rights perspective, but the base is also billions and billions of dollars over budget. There are numerous design flaws in the proposed construction. For instance, the soil at the proposed location is just too soft to build on. It's being called mayonnaise-like in substance. That's right, mayonnaise. And it's like that all the way down to a depth of 90 meters. So it doesn't make much sense to build a huge military base at this location. It would actually endanger the lives of the soldiers stationed there. Not to mention, this location occurs directly over a major earthquake fault. And then when you think about it from a diplomatic and from a peace perspective, it doesn't make much sense. Building this base is only going to aggravate America's and Japan's rivals in China and North Korea. It's not going to help peace and security. The U.S. military in the past have said that this base is actually not necessary for security purposes because the Marines would not be used in the event of a conflict in Asia, and this base is primarily going to be a Marine Corps base. So no matter how you look at it, it just doesn't make much sense. Additionally, let's say, God forbid, but what if there were a conflict in Asia and one of America's enemies, let's say, launched an attack against Okinawa? In today's style of warfare, it would probably be missiles. So missile would reach Okinawa from, let's say, China or Korea within just 10 minutes, and it would devastate pretty much the entire island. So all of those soldiers stationed there, along with all of the civilians in the surrounding area, would be annihilated instantly, and they would have nothing to defend themselves. Okinawa recently held a referendum back in February in which over 72% of the population voted strongly against this base. Back in December of 2018, I started a petition asking for the immediate stop to the construction of this base. We have over 211,000 signatures on our petition so far. So I came to the United Nations Human Rights Council asking that an investigation be done and asking that the council protect the rights of the Luchu people. The Luchuans have been very strongly, peacefully resisting both Japanese and American oppression for decades now. So, in my opinion, the UN Human Rights Council really needs to do something to protect the rights of the Luchu people. The UN, stands for peace, ostensibly. And if the UN does not do anything to support the Luchu people, it's basically sending a message to the world that the UN doesn't care about peace, and that peace isn't enough to get the attention of the UN, and that only violence, it only pays attention to violence. So that would be sending really the wrong message to the rest of the world. We don't want to encourage violence in any way, shape, or form. So I'm really hoping the UN Human Rights Council takes this issue in Luchu seriously, and that it does something to protect the rights of the Luchu people. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to learn more, please check out our website, peaceforokinawa.org. Also, please feel free to check out our social media pages. My team and I are constantly putting content out there. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you guys next time.
So we have to say our thanks to Mr. Robert Kajiwara for his video. And the panel for Ms. Catherine Fisher, we've got 12 minutes.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Catherine Jane Fisher, and this is my book. It's called I Am Catherine Jane. It's my second book that I wrote, and it is about my story. So my story is that I had a love of Japan since I was very small. So we're going back a long time. But I just like to take you back to 20 years ago, and I became a rape victim by the United States military. So I was raped by a United States military serviceman, and I went immediately to the Japanese police, and I was so shocked because they treated me like a criminal. And they held me for over 13 hours, didn't get any food, no water. I begged them to let me go to hospital, and they said if I was hurt, then I needed to show them where. And so they denied me of medical treatment. So in the end, they just let me go maybe like 13 hours later and didn't even give me any underwear to wear home. So I was like, what's going on here? I love Japan so much. Why are they treating me like a criminal? And so I thought I was the first rape victim in Japan by the United States military. So I did some research. And then what I found shocked me. You see, my husband is also from Okinawa, and so I have Okinawan children. And he told me that when he left Okinawa, he had to have some kind of travel documents to get out of Okinawa to come to Tokyo. But I never knew how many crimes had happened in Okinawa, and if someone could just help me, maybe we could just like pass this around. This is the these are the crimes that have happened in Okinawa. And so you need to go down the middle there. You just go down the middle. And when I realized that I was not alone, and there were thousands of crimes of women and men and children and babies being raped and murdered, I was so shocked. So according to the Ministry of Defense, there have been at least 210,000 crimes and accidents and aircraft accidents which land into schools, and in all those cases about over 1,000 people were killed. And if I could just talk about some recent cases, is that in Okinawa, a woman was just murdered in front of her children. And then a year ago, an Okinawa woman was taken from the streets, and she was murdered, stuffed into a suitcase, and he raped her as well. After I was raped, near the same place where I was raped, a lady who was just cleaning the bus. She was a bus cleaning lady. And she was on her way to work, and this man said to her, give me some money. And she said, no, I'm not going to give you any money. And so he beat her to death on the street and left her bleeding to die. Can you imagine this is happening in Japan? Why has these human rights violations been swept under the carpet so the world eyes cannot see this? And so I have here in my book, there is an agreement which was made with the United States. It's called the Subcommittee and Jurisdiction Agreement Matters for the Criminal Panel that they had. And in it there, it said that we would like to point out that the Japanese authorities, they have the freedom to determine which cases are of material importance. So, I guess I was not of material importance, because the man who raped me, during my court case, he was sent out of Japan. And so I said to the Japanese government, you know, I have a court case here. Why he can just run away? And they said, sorry, we have a status of forces agreement which the United States military has with many countries. And in the status of forces agreement, in Article 16, it states that the US military and their people have to respect the laws of Japan. So I said, but it says they have to respect the laws of Japan. So he should come back to Japan. And they said, but it only says respect. So we can't do anything to help him. And I said, so what am I supposed to do? He ran away. What would you do? If the man that raped you was allowed to flee the ports? So what I did, I decided to look for him by myself. So I looked for over 10 years and I found him. He was in prison. He had abused his children and he had raped another woman. So, why is this important to any other country? It is because these rapists are being sent back to the United States without any kind of criminal acts against them. For example, if you look at the 1995 gang rape case with Leonard, he was sent back. He was a convicted rapist. He was sent back to America. As soon as he was sent back, he raped another woman, a university student, and then he killed her, and then he committed suicide. These are just a few of the cases. I don't have time to tell you all of these cases. So when I gave my intervention, Japan had the right to reply, and they waived the right because they know that this is the truth and that this has been allowed to not come to the world's eyes. So let me, I digress. So I'll go back to, I went to look for him by myself for 10 years, and lo and behold, I get the telephone from my lawyer in the US, and my case is already costing $200,000, and I have done 7 court cases already. And my lawyer said to me, he just gave a document to say that the United States military sent him out of Japan during your court trial. And I said, okay, and I know all of these cases. What would you do? You know that United States military sent a rapist back to the United States, and I know they did this in other cases. So I called my lawyer, and I said, I must win this for everyone. I must win this case. So the case has cost $200,000 already. But these lawyers, these American lawyers, said they're going to do it pro bono for me, which I'm very lucky. But I said to my lawyers, you tell the judge, I will take $1 if that guy admits to what he did. And so the judge said, but he said to him, will you admit that you did that? And he said yes. So now I have the $1. I have the $1. Because to me, justice was not about money. Justice is never about money. You can't just say to someone, because I killed your wife, here is a blank check, which is what they do in Japan. What are these people worth? Are they worth money? Or do we deserve respect around the world? And why has Japan been able to do this for so many years, for 70 years? So for 18 years now, I tried to change this agreement, the SOFA, that Article 16 that allows the American military to leave the country. And so, there's so many cases here that I would just wanted to talk about. There's like a case where a 6-year-old girl, can you imagine, just 6 years old, and she was raped by United States military servicemen, and then he mutilated her and threw her in the trash. So is this what people think about Okinawan people, or the people we are just trash? That they don't want to help us or do anything? For 18 years I have tried to change this agreement. And I have a name card that said, if you are against rape, you can change this agreement. why they won't change it? So, for me, I think that the impunity of the US military crimes must stop. And today, I made a very strong statement again today that we called for an urgent Human Rights Council intervention before the 2020 Olympics. Because visitors to Japan may become rape victims like we have. Because rape can happen to anyone. So, but the sad thing about this $1 is when it arrived to my house, I got the check, not the dollar, it arrived. And in the news was the story of an Okinawa woman went missing. And she was missing for too long, so I knew that something had gone wrong. So I fought for so long, and then for this $1 to try and make a difference. The woman was found stuck in a suitcase and left in the forest. So I don't know how long the Japanese government can continue to keep on denying this and say that they are human rights, that they have this Human Rights Council here, but they are not protecting the rights of the Okinawan people. And I wanted to just show you one more thing. This is a replica of this one here. You put on this, the Okinawan people had to wear this around their neck like this. Because if they spoke the language of the Okinawans, then they would be tortured in some way, hit, or something like that. And because Japanese and Okinawan language is completely different, and so they were forced not to speak their language as well. So there's been so many human rights violations that have happened in Okinawa. And the last thing I'd just like to say is that it's not, are we against the military being there, or is it okay for them to be there? We have to stop digressing from the point and say, because that could be divided, to have a person there, to say they're okay to be there, or to say they're not to be there. But the point is, no one is divided when you kill and murder a person. Everybody agrees that this is wrong. And so we have to keep on stop this digression and say, oh, but the American military should be there, or maybe they shouldn't be there. The point is, no one else should be killed or murdered by the United States military service. And we must make sure that the United Nations intervenes into this so no more people are sacrificed. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a really different life story and very sad. But at the same time, we are very grateful. Congratulations to you from all of our heart. Now I'm giving the floor to Mr. Prof.h.c, Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Kingdom of Hawaiian Islands. You have got the floor.
Aloha. Aloha I mai o kou, ai maluhia ho'i ke akua, I kou kākou mākua ai ka ko kākou mākua ai ka haku I Yesu a me ka uhane e molele. I did this very same thing I coached Mehmet to do. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank Kapaj for sponsoring this event. We have been talking about self-determination, and of course I have been here for a number of years, along with Mr. Changbu, who of course has been here many more years than I have, and Dr. Albert Desaias and others, speaking about self-determination, and actually very, very much concerned by the fact that the United Nations doesn't seem to be concerned about self-determination anymore. This self-determination, of course, was one of the principal values that the United Nations proposed or supported at the very beginning of the United Nations. But over the years, it seems to have waned, and particularly in the area of decolonization and in the area of self-government for countries, particularly those that are under occupation or some kind of captivity to another country. So when Mr. Kajiwara spoke, he talked about the similarities between Hawaii and Okinawa. And indeed, there are many similarities, and there are some distinctions as well. For one thing, Hawaii was, yes, it was a sovereign country, always has been a sovereign country, but it did something incredible in 1843. During that period of time, the rest of the Pacific was being swallowed up by colonial countries. So Great Britain, France, Germany, the Dutch, and others were all active in the Pacific, basically annexing and taking different countries that had been historically independent on their own. But in 1843, the Hawaiian Kingdom decided it would do something about preserving its independence. And the best way they figured to do that was to become recognized by the great powers of the world as a sovereign independent country. And so they sent an emissary, or several emissaries, to Great Britain, to London and to Paris, to talk to the two greatest powers of the world at that time, and to convince them that Hawaii should be recognized as a sovereign state. And this was a very daring move because in the colonial period, nobody had achieved this before as far as becoming sovereign and independent. And Hawaii, having not been a colonial country, was still considered by the colonial countries as some kind of a subservient cultural phenomenon. So the Hawaiian Kingdom sent these emissaries to London and to Paris, and they achieved what they were sent to do. And in this recent article in Diva, which is the International Diplomat magazine published here at the United Nations, there's an article, and it says, celebrating 175 years of independence. And so Hawaii was actually a recognized independent country because Great Britain and France passed a joint proclamation in 1843 declaring that Hawaii was an independent country and that neither country would interfere with that sovereignty of the Hawaiian Islands. Soon after, the United States joined them as well, and then Brussels, and then there was a flow of other countries. In the end, Hawaii was recognized and had treaties with 46 other nations. Now, this is significant because when the United Nations was formed in 1945, there were only 51 sovereign countries in that group. So 46 out of those 51 actually had recognized the Hawaiian Kingdom as a sovereign state and had treaties with us. And in 1860, I think it was 72, the Hawaiian Islands, the Hawaiian Kingdom, joined the Universal Postal Union, being one of the earliest members of that postal union. And by doing so, it made itself a member, or it became a member, accepted as a member, not only as a sovereign state, but as a member of the Postal Union, which was the first international group formed, a cooperative group, an organization to support one another's, not only sovereignty, but one another's ability to transmit mail and other communications and funds amongst each other. So it was actually the precursor of the League of Nations. When the League of Nations was formed, the first ones in the League of Nations were the members of the Universal Postal Union that already had this organized understanding or treaty with one another. And of course, we know that the League of Nations eventually was discontinued, and it was replaced by the United Nations in 1945. So, if you follow this train of sovereignty, the Hawaiian Kingdom was a member of the Universal Postal Union and a member of the Family of Nations. Therefore, what happened to its sovereignty when the United States started to claim that it had sovereignty over the Hawaiian Islands? Well, it's kind of a long story, but Hawaii was functioning in the 19th century as a fully accepted and fully functional sovereign state. And we not only were involved in international trade and commerce, but we were also involved in the discourse of international affairs and political affairs. The discussions about slavery, the discussions about neutrality, and all these types of international law and of the rule of law. these were all subjects and topics that the Hawaiian Kingdom participated very strongly in and actually helped to lead several of those areas, particularly in slavery. For instance, Hawaii outlawed slavery in 1854, even though there wasn't any slavery in Hawaii, but they said that Hawaii would not respect the practice of slavery, and that if any slave were to touch Hawaiian soil, he would be immediately freed. And so this was 10, 11 years before the Civil War broke out. And so we're looking at a very progressive nation, not only a sovereign state, but a progressive state. The Hawaiian Kingdom had electricity in its government buildings before the United States had electricity or telephones in the White House. So, and I bring this up because in 1893, the United States decided that it needed to somehow get its hands on Hawaii. Even though we had 5 treaties of friendship and trade with the United States, they somehow decided they needed the islands. Why? Because they decided they needed a naval base in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And Pearl Harbor was the ideal spot. So they began to conspire since the 1870s to somehow acquire Hawaii. They failed because the monarch and people of Hawaii would not hear anything of annexation to the United States. To them it was ludicrous because Hawaii was a sovereign state. But the United States pursued that, and then they found allies within the Hawaiian Kingdom. And the allies were the sugar planters, those that had become extremely wealthy on sugar because they had these large plantations. And they had sold their sugar to the United States during the Civil War, when the southern states had ceased producing sugar and the northern states were starved for sugar. They made these great deals with the sugar planters of Hawaii to ship sugar to the Union. And after the Civil War, of course, after the southern states started to come back online with sugar production, all of a sudden the prices for sugar from Hawaii began to fall. So the sugar planters, wanting to keep a high price on their sugar, decided amongst themselves that it would be best to have Hawaii annexed to the United States. But of course, the kings and the rulers of Hawaii, as well as the people of Hawaii, were all adamantly against any notion of annexation. So this had to be done by trickery. And what the sugar planters did was they contrived with the United States to land troops on a certain day in Hawaii as a show of force. And then on that next day, the sugar planters would declare that they were now the rulers of the Hawaiian Kingdom. So it was a coup d'etat backed by the military force of the United States. Of course, the Queen decided not to provoke any kind of open warfare with the United States, thinking that this could be settled diplomatically. And so she decided to stand down, not have her troops go and repel the invaders, but basically not fire a shot and decide to leave this in the hands of the President of the United States and the international community to resolve peacefully, diplomatically, because she knew that what the United States had committed was an act of war against a friendly treaty nation. And indeed she was right. 9 months later, the President of the United States, Grover Cleveland, admitted that the United States had indeed committed an act of war and had basically violated the rights of a sovereign state. And he committed the United States to return the Hawaiian Islands. However, those that were pushing for Hawaii to be in charge or to have a naval base in the Pacific, and those that wanted the better sugar markets prevailed and basically paralyzed Congress from acting to restore Hawaii's sovereignty. So by doing that, the United States, 5 years later, the Spanish-American War breaks out, and then the United States really goes to town on building Pearl Harbor up as a military base. What few people understand is that the Spanish-American War was over in a couple of months, but the Filipinos, who now felt that they had been liberated by the United States naval powers in Manila, they thought they were liberated and they were now going to be an independent free country. What the United States announced that now you're a colony of the United States. And so the Filipinos took up arms to repel the new colonialists. And so that war lasted about 7 years. About 4 years were very, very bloody, and over 250,000 Filipinos died in that war. Over 5,000 U.S. troops died in that war. But you never hear about it, because that was a war that was being covered up, but under the guise or under the actions of that war, the United States strengthened its hold on the Hawaiian Islands, because the Hawaiian Islands became that important military base that the United States said they needed to prosecute their wars or their activities in the Western Pacific Ocean. So the United States has been building up Hawaii as a military base ever since. And this is where we're talking about self-determination. The people of Hawaii never approved of that. And yet the U.S. military continues to build it up to the point where it's now the Pacific Command Center, or the Asia Pacific Command Center, called PACCOM. It's the largest command center in the world, or the largest area. It covers the entire Pacific Ocean, which is roughly 1/3 of the planet's surface. It's the Pacific Ocean. And Pacific Command is the largest command or military headquarters in the world. And that is based in Hawaii. So Hawaii is deeply immersed into the United States military. We have been campaigning for many, many years to rid ourselves of the United States military, but they have persisted up until, but it looks like because the nature of warfare is beginning to change, there is an opportunity that we can actually begin to convince the United States to leave, especially if we regain and actually reactivate our sovereignty and our independence in the Hawaiian Islands. If we do so, then it's up to us as to whether or not the United States military bases remain. As Mr. Kajiwara pointed out, the military bases actually do us no good in Hawaii as far as the people are concerned. It only serves the purposes of the United States, and it puts our people at great risk, because we have become the #1 target, being the largest Pacific Command Center in the world. We have become the #1 target of any enemy of the United States. Well, the recent North Korea, a year ago, a year and a half ago, there was a false alarm of a missile launch toward Hawaii. It became very evident at that point, even though it was a false report, it became very evident how vulnerable we are. And I couldn't get my graphics to work, but if you look at the island of Oahu, it's 22% military bases, that entire island, not just Pearl Harbor. In order to take out all of those military bases with one strike, one would have to launch a very large capacity nuclear missile and have it explode approximately half a mile above the island, meaning the entire island will be blanketed by a nuclear blast. And that means the annihilation of everyone on the island. So Hawaii is at great, great risk because of the presence of the U.S. military, and because of of Hawaii's inability at this point to express self-determination, to exercise self-determination. So we're here at the United Nations, basically to urge the United Nations, and there are many other side effects and human rights violations going on because of the occupation of Hawaiian Islands by the United States. So we are at this point urging the United Nations to wake up and start to reactivate their purpose, one of their primary purposes at the start of the United Nations, which is self-determination. So thank you very much, and we're running for time.
Yeah, many thanks, dear Mr. Nakamura. We are just running out of time, last 4 minutes, and I'm looking for questions from the floor. Any questions from the floor? Yes, Mr. Majid Tarambo. Please.
Well, thank you very much for giving me floor, and it was indeed very heartening to hear Madam Catherine, particularly the rape situation, which one should condemn all its manifestations. And of course, my good old friend, Leon Foreign Minister of Hawaii, Kingdom of Hawaii. My question is this. If the Japanese police is of that level, that where there is such a severe problem, why haven't we heard about it so far within this building? This is probably second or third time since Leon started having interaction with Okinawa people that we have come to know it. It was from the Mars station, I was thinking, isn't it, Leon?
Yes.
But we haven't heard it so far. Why is that if the level of atrocities of such magnitude? And to Leon, I just want to re-emphasize that of course we have lost the right to self-determination within these council chambers, but as NGO community we have to continue to fight for it. We have to bring back it to the council agenda, because we believe, both of us believe, and all of us believe, democracy is self-determination, and self-determination is democracy.
Okay. So I actually said the same thing. Why doesn't this story get out to the world? But you see, on the small island of Okinawa, they have a press club there as well. And I said to the journalist, why, you are not good journalists, that your story does not get out of this island? No, they are very, very competent and good journalists there. It's just that nobody cares. In Tokyo, you'll say another woman was murdered in Okinawa, and they say, another one. It's just like some kind of, like a Twitter. It's just another one, another one, another one. So it's, people are just being accustomed to so many people being killed, and they just say Okinawa, raped, murdered, is just something that just goes together. But as I said before, for 18 years I've been trying to change this. But for this I get followed by secret police and receive death threats. So, even though I sacrificed my, this for the $1, I would expect that, the Japanese government would say, oh, thank you for doing such a good job for us. But instead, no. But we will keep trying and change this, try and change it, and I hope that, no one is left behind. There's so many things. I just hope that the UN will take it. So thank you.
And last most, Mr. Leon.
Okay, very, very short. Thank you so much.
It is our event, we will give that 1
Yes.
minute.
Well, 1 minute. We feel that we have been heard, Hawaii has been heard, and we're making good progress. It's a little slow going, but we're on the verge of some pretty important breakthroughs. So you'll be hearing more about Hawaii very soon, as far as some actions that the United Nations will be able to take. So just wanted to let you know that it's not all doom and gloom. It's actually, I believe we can do some things there. So mahalo. Aloha.
Thank you very much. I will just add one last thing. The Ryukyu Kingdom and Hawaiian Kingdom were the subjects of international law in the 19th century. They were not under the definition of discovery law. I just want to remind you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think this should be preserved.
Thank you. This is such a hard